Thank you so much. This is more than a surprise. And I just want to thank you all. And may God continue to bless you as a church, as a family, as we grow together looking for that blessed home. I want to say Happy New Year to all of you. On behalf of my dear wife, honey, could you just raise your hand? And we are thankful and grateful that God has spared our lives to see a new year. We're glad that God has spared your lives as well. I bring you greetings from your conference, Greater New York, our president, Pastor Henry Barris, our treasurer, Isaiah Javier, and myself. We just want you to know that you are one of our prized possessions. And by God's grace, we want you to continue to grow. It's good to see you, Tony. May God keep blessing and keeping you, man. You have been a backbone to this church and a tower of strength. And only when you get to heaven, you will know how many hearts and lives you have blessed. Sharon, God bless you. Okay. I see one of my colleagues that we work together at the office, Sister Veronica. It's good to see you, Veronica. And you have just sung me happy birthday. There's no congruence to the song and my sermon topic, Sent Home to Die. But I will still try. Bow your heads with me. Heavenly Father, may your divine approval be upon this message. Speak to me and through me to your people. And bless us all, we pray, in Jesus' name. She stood there, gazing intently at herself, shattered by the reality of her own misfortune, shattered by her own futile search for help, shattered by her diminished financial resources. She stood there, a victim of a disease that had no cure, a victim of a disease that elicited discrimination, a victim of a disease that brought her embarrassment. She stood there, broken by her circumstance, broken by her reality, broken by the raging rejection. She stood there. Why? Because for 12 long years she sought help and found none. For 12 years she suffered the stigma of being considered ceremonially unclean. For 12 years, her dreams were broken and her hopes were shattered. For 12 years, she was an outcast to society and a recluse to her family. For 12 years, she was exhausted, broken, battered, bewildered, and bombarded. And now she stood there, at the crossroad of death, at the breaking point of faith, at the mercy of hope. She stood there and watched the crowd press in on Jesus. Mark chapter 5:28 tells us, she pondered in her heart, oh, if I may only but touch the hem of his garment. Like the crippled man at the gate beautiful, she stood there. Like blind Bartimaeus, she stood there. Like the thief on the cross in need of salvation, she stood there. Like the impotent man at the pool of Shiloh, she stood there wondering in her heart, if I may but just touch the hem of his garment. Perhaps she felt that it was easier for the disciples to get close to Jesus. They were his friends, so they could easily touch his garments. Perhaps she felt that men like Jairus could get close to Jesus because he's rich. And maybe she thought Jesus would always make way for rich people. Perhaps she felt that she was too poor, too sinful, too sick, too feeble, too dumb, too ugly, too unimportant, too insignificant, and too depressed to get to Jesus. And how do you blame her? How could a woman of her day, forbidden by society at times to appear in public or to give testimony in a court of law, how could such a woman get to Jesus? Besides, the nature of her disease, together with the ritual uncleanliness involved, was so embarrassing and offensive. How could an outcast, an outsider, a reject, a scrap, a stranger, a discard, a no-class citizen, an odoriferous carrier of a malignant disease get to Jesus? And so she stood there pondering in her heart, if I only could but touch the hem of his garment. Let me talk to the church today. You see, my brothers and sisters, wishes are not enough. Turn to your neighbors and say, neighbor. Come on, neighbor. Wishes are not enough. Turn to the next neighbor and say, neighbor. Oh, neighbor. Wishes are not enough. Turn to yourself and say, self. Oh, self. Wishes are not enough. To wish, my friends, is not enough. Wishes must be put into action. As long as this woman stood there and wished nothing would happen, as long as she stood there wanting to get close to Jesus, nothing would happen. As long as she stood there hoping to get close to Jesus, nothing would happen. For wishes and hope and faith are not enough. These must be put in action. Faith, my friends, without works is death. Some time ago, when I was studying at Andrews University, I used to teach in the school system of Benton Harbor. Those of you who have been there, you know where Benton Harbor is. Benton Harbor is about 10 miles out of Barron Springs. Twin city of St. Joe and Benton Harbor. And yes, they were opposites. Benton Harbor at the time was considered one of the 10 worst cities in the United States of America. Name it. Drugs, prostitution, petty thieves and crimes and violence. That's Benton Harbor for you. And so the school system was troubled. It was not a different or unnatural thing for you as a teacher to be in your class, and if you scold a child or for some strange reason had to report a child, that when you get to your car in the parking lot that you will see one or two tires flat. Or maybe they would take an object and they would key the car all over. That's just simple, natural. It is not an unnatural thing for you to be in the classroom and a boy that was sent to the principal's office, instead of going to the principal's office, he's on the outside and he's throwing stones through the windows. That's Benton Harbor for you. So here I was teaching, and one day in my class, I saw a group of boys huddling at the back. So I went to investigate, and I caught a boy selling drugs right there in the classroom. Of course, it was reported. Police were called in. And for the first time and only time in my life still, I've ever given a report. I was questioned by a police officer. And so the long and short of it is that he was expelled. Well, not expelled. He was suspended from school for a period of time. Well, that incident passed away, and here we came to the end of the semester, and we were having what they call Parent-Teachers Association. Not parent-teachers. Teachers were meeting with, parents were meeting with the teachers to discuss conference. Thank you so much. And so I sat at my desk in the gymnasium where all the other teachers were sitting at their little desks, and the parents were coming in to talk to you about their students and to go over the report and how they had done and da-da-da-da. And you know how it goes. Those parents whose children got high marks, you're the best teacher in the world. And those whose children, the marks were not so good, you know, you are kind of dumb. And, you know, so I'm there sitting at my desk taking my highs and my lows, my highs and my lows. And there was a time when it was lull. No one was coming to my desk. So I sat there reading the papers. And out of the clear, I heard a voice says, "Are you Mr. Smith?" And when I looked in front of me, I had to go up, 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 up. And when I got to the top, it was a lady up there. And she looked at me with a wicked look, and she said, "I say, are you Mr. Smith?" And just the tone of her voice and the look on her face, I knew something was wrong. I looked across, I saw another brother sitting over there, another teacher, and I was so tempted. Oh, no, not that, Mr. Smith. But I mustered the courage, and I said, "Yes, I am." She said, "Good." And before I could tell her to take a seat, she sat, "Brah." She said, "Teacher, I want to talk to you." Okay? Remember where I am, Benton Harbor. Remember what happens in Benton Harbor. So you know I'm a little nervous. She said, "I want to talk to you." She said, "That boy that you say you caught selling drugs in your classroom and he was suspended, I want you to know that's my boy." I said, she said, "You don't know me. You don't know who I am. But let me tell you this. When I was 10 years old, I was raped by my math teacher. At age 11, I became pregnant. I had an abortion. At age 14, I stabbed my science teacher. That's when my heart went. At age 15, I got pregnant again. And I gave up the baby for adoption. At age 16, I had a nervous breakdown. I was confined to a mental institution for 2 years. When I got out, I went to Chicago, 75 miles from Benton Harbor. I went to Chicago, and there I started working with a gang in Chicago. I met a man who promised to marry me. I only to discover after the relationship started that he had connections with the mafia in New York. I got pregnant for him. And when I was 6 months pregnant, I was standing at the bus stop, and he was there, and a car drove up, the windows wound down, and someone with a machine gun gunned him down in front of me. They pumped about 10 bullets in him and killed him dead on the spot, right before my eyes. She says that I tried leaving the gang, but they told me I couldn't. And I insisted. And my baby, whose father was killed in front of me, my baby was 1 year old. And you know what they did? They kidnapped my boy. And they say, "You stay with me if you want him to be alive." She said, I tried help. I tried to get help from the police, from the FBI, from everywhere. No one could tell me where my boy was. 11 years passed. 11 years passed, and I saw or heard nothing about my boy. My job with the gang was to push drugs among school children. I was caught selling drugs. I was put in prison. While I was in prison, I became a Muslim. I committed suicide several times. She says, "Teacher, these eyes of mine, I have seen every imaginable evil that you could ever think of. Finally, I slipped out of Chicago and I came back to Benton Harbor. Recently, I got a tip that my son was living in North Carolina. He was living with a homosexual man and an alcoholic woman, his alcoholic sister. A teacher, this is the boy I am talking about. I just got him back less than 1 year ago. I don't know him. He doesn't know me. 11 years passed when we were separated. And so I come here today because I just want you to understand my boy. I'm here today, teacher, because I'm asking for your help. Recently, I met someone who introduced me to Jesus and taught me how to pray to him. And 1 week ago, I was baptized. I am now a Christian serving my Lord. But I need help. I need help with my boy. And I'm here to beg you if you can help me. I got up from my seat, and with tears coming down my eyes, I reach over, and I hug that big lady. I hugged her. I said to her, "How have you been since you gave your heart to Jesus?" She says, "I'm just pressing on the upward way. New heights I'm gaining every day. Still praying as I onward bound. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground." I made her a promise that I would help her boy when he came back. And he did come back to school. And I reached out to him. I treated him like he was my son. And it got to the point that he stopped calling me teacher. He started calling me cousin. When he sees me in the hallway, he says, "Hey, cuz, how you doing?" Until the day I left that school, he was my friend. I want to talk to you, church, because I know you are going through what is called 10 days of prayer. And I have a provoking question to ask you. Are you doing this as a ritual? Or are you really agonizing with God for something, for someone, or for yourself? Are you wrestling like Jacob did, wrestling with God, and look at him and say, "I will not let thee go until thou bless me"? Wrestling with him. Is there something you are putting before the Lord? And as you wrestle with him, as you agonize over it, as you pray for it, you tell yourself, "I must touch the hem of his garment." You wrestle with him and you tell God, "I will not let thee go until thou bless me." There comes a time in the life of the Christian when prayer is not just prayer her is a fight. It's an agonizing moment between you and your God. I don't know what this new year has to offer. But the one thing I can say to you, church, the one thing I can say, if things get rough, hold on to God and let him know, I will not let thee go until thou bless me. If things get tough, reach out in faith and touch the hem of his garment. When things were at their worst for this woman, she fought through the crowd. She pressed through the crowd until she was close enough to touch the hem. Mark chapter 5 verse 29 tells us the result of her touch. It says, and straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up immediately, right away. She had the faith, she acted on her faith, and God rewarded her of her faith. Sometimes we give up too easily. We ask God for something, and because it didn't happen right away, we just give up. I would not be here today if I behaved that way, if I didn't have that faith. Let me share with you my personal story. I met the love of my life in college. 1 year after graduation, I don't know if it was foolish or wise, but we got married. And God has been good to us since that time until today. You know, I just love him more and more each day. Love her more and more each day. 3 months. 3 months after we were married, I was in my pastoral district. I had 9 churches pastoring. It was the most exciting time of my life. A young pastor, a beautiful wife, and 9 churches. Life cannot be better unless you're in heaven. But at the time in my country, Jamaica, a plague broke out. It's called the dengue fever. You catch the dengue fever by the bite of the Anopheles mosquito. That plague started raging across Jamaica, and they did not have the medication to treat the problem. And so people were getting really sick. And the worst part of this disease is that if you have a relapse with it, death was occurring. As you turn the radio on, television, whatever, you're just hearing so many people died yesterday, so many people died because of dengue fever. That was just a report, just a report. And here I am, young, vibrant, strong, energetic pastor, and I caught the dengue. I fell sick. And I knew I had the dengue fever, but I'm telling myself I have to do the work of the Lord. I had planned an elders meeting. This was my first, as I told you, I just married for 3 months. This was my first pastoral district. I just started out my assignment, and I had arranged for all the elders to come and to meet at the city church. I was going to have this big elders meeting to put all my plans before them and how we were going to go forward as a district. So the time was coming, and the meeting was a Sunday, and the Thursday, I decided I was going to drive from elder to elder. I was going to go to all of the districts, and I was going to inform the first elder, remember to gather the troops to come. And so I left my precious wife at home. I said, honey, I'll soon be back, and I drove out. But as soon as I got up into the mountains, it started raining. When I got out of the car, I ran through the rain into the house. I fellowshiped with the elder, ran back to my car, and I did it a few times, and I got wet. And by the time I got home, I had a roasting fever. That night, honey must have changed the sheet about 3 times, the bed linens, because I was just perspiring profusely. You could literally, when you squeeze the pajama, you could literally see water flowing from it. I had this high temperature. So by the Friday, I was in the hospital. I was at the doctor's office, and the doctor says, Pastor, you have dengue fever, and you have it the worst way. Sabbath morning, I got dressed, put my clothes on. I'm heading to church, but I was feeling so bad, I took a beeline to the doctor's office. He took one look at me. He says, where you going? I said, church. He said, Reverend, go home. You cannot go to church. And he sent me home. I had the dengue fever left me with a problem. There's nothing I could keep in my stomach. If I eat, if I drink, once I swallow, anything goes down. If it goes down at 10 miles per hour, it's coming back up at 50 miles an hour. And the worst part about it is that the medication they had to treat the disease at the time was not an injection, it's something you had to swallow. So as soon as I swallowed the medication, it would not stay, so I could not get better. I got progressively worse. I went to 1 doctor, 2 doctors, 3 doctors, 4 doctors, 5 different doctors to no avail. More than a week passed and I was at home suffering. I was never ever a big person, and I was just... And so one Sunday morning, my situation had gotten progressively worse. And my wife said, I can't keep you in the house. We've been going from doctors to doctors and you're not getting well. I have to take you to the emergency. So she dressed me. She put me in the car. She didn't have a driver's license at the time. Look at the risk I put my life in. And she drove me to the hospital, which was 10 miles away. I went straight to the emergency. And I'm inside the emergency room and the doctors are, and before I could hear them asking me a question, I passed out. I don't know what happened afterwards. When I regained consciousness, I was in the hospital. I was admitted to the hospital. Let me tell you something about Cornwall Regional Hospital in the city of Montego Bay. Cornwall Regional Hospital was just built. So at the time when I was admitted, it might have been about 2 or 3 years old. It was a new hospital. But in those 3 years of existence, Cornwall Regional Hospital had one reputation. And that is, anyone that goes to the 6th floor, they move from the 6th floor to the morgue. Nobody wants to go to the 6th floor. It just had that reputation. 99% of the cases of 6th floor morgue. So I woke up. And the first question I asked, honey, where I am? She says, Cornwall Regional Hospital. You know what's the next question? What floor am I on? And honey says, don't worry about it. Don't worry about that. We just want you to get well. And I saw her eyes welling up. I knew something was wrong. So I asked the question again, honey, what floor am I on? And she says, honey, don't worry about the floor. Right now we're praying for you and you will soon be okay. And I swallowed because I knew I was on the 6th floor. I stayed there for days and days and days, and they were feeding me intravenously. And every time the doctor comes, check my vitals, he ordered for the nurse to give me a cup of herbal tea. And when the nurse comes and took the spoon and put it to my lip, and when I swallow 1 teaspoonful of that beverage. 1 teaspoonful. As soon as it went down, it started. And what was happening is that it didn't just bring up a teaspoon of fluid is nothing to bring up. But it was a spasm that I was having. It just continued. It just continued for maybe half an hour. Nothing is coming up, but I can't stop it. They can't stop it. Every bone, my rib cage is hurting. My back is hurting. Everything is hurting. And there's nothing they can do. And this thing continued. And one day, Honey was sitting there. I don't know what was going through her mind. She has never said it to this day. And the doctors walk in. He said, Mrs. Smith, the best thing we could tell you right now is that you take your husband home. Enjoy the few moments with him and let him die peacefully. There's nothing more we can do for him. Nothing more. She burst out into tears as she started packing the few little things I had in that hospital room. She changed my pajama, put on some clothes. I can't tell you what I was feeling at that time because I was numb. She and my sister, they carried me to the car and started driving 10 miles back home because I was sent home to die. My brothers and sisters, you don't know how it feels when you are sent home to die. It is awful. Those 10 miles are still the longest journey I have ever taken. And as I traveled from hospital to home, no one is talking. I began to go over my life. Why, God? Why? I told you I wanted to be your servant. I wanted to preach the everlasting gospel. I gave you my heart when I was 13 years of age. I dedicated my life to you. Why? Why? And I got home. The members of the church had come. The place was filled with people. And she took me through the crowd into my bedroom and closed the door, and we sat there. And in a short while, the spasm started again. And we couldn't contain it. We couldn't stop it. I'm hurting each time I gasp. And it's just going on. It's just going on. Nothing can stay in my stomach. And even when nothing is there, I'm just going on like that. And I remember vividly tears coming down Honey's eyes. And she said to me, she says, Hon, I'm sorry, but I cannot watch you die. I have to take you back to the hospital. And I looked at her and I said, I don't want to go back to the hospital. She says, but what can I do? I say, honey, could you just leave me alone? She says, no, I can't do that. I say, please, just leave me alone for a moment. I just want to be alone. And as she walked out of that room, and she closed it behind her, with what little strength I had, I rolled off the bed and I slumped to my knees. And I started talking to God. I prayed and I prayed. And then I opened my eyes and I took my hymnal and I started singing the song. Yes, I know I'm no singer, but I have to tell you as it is. The great physician now is near, the sympathizing Jesus. He speaks the drooping heart to cheer. Oh, hear the voice of Jesus. Sweetest note in serve. Sweetest name on mortal. Sweetest carol ever. Jesus blessed, Jesus blessed, Jesus. I started praying again. And in that prayer, I made God a promise. I said, God, if you heal me today, I will spend the rest of my life serving you. Somewhere in that prayer, on my knees, I fell asleep. I cannot tell you for how long I slept, but what I know is that when I woke up, the sun had already set. It was Friday. The sun had already set. The Sabbath had begun. And when I woke up, the room was dark, and my entire soul, I was hungry. There was this hunger pang that had taken me over, had consumed my soul. I was just hungry. And I called her, I said, honey, and she came, she flicked the light on, she saw me still on my knees. She says, what happened? I says, I'm hungry. She says, I know, but you can't. I says, bring me something. She says, no, honey, I can't do that. I said, bring me something, honey, I'm hungry. And she went out and she brought back a cup of tea, mint tea. And I drank the mint tea, and it did nothing to me to absolve the hunger. I says, honey, I am hungry. And she brought another cup of tea, and I drank the mint tea, but that's when I was hungry. And you have to understand, in the West Indian community on a Friday evening, it's a tradition where they make soup for supper, and the way we make soup is that soup is a complete meal. You have dumplings, you have yams, you have everything is in it. When you get a bowl of that, that's it. So I said, honey, you didn't make any soup today. She said, don't worry, ask about that. You know you can't take anything. I said, no, honey, I'm hungry. Bring a little of the soup. So she came back with a little cup of soup. I could barely put it to my mouth. It was done. I said, honey, could you bring a dish of soup for me? She said, honey, what's going on? I said, I don't know, but I know I'm hungry. Bring a dish of soup. And as she was going, I said, by the way, put one of the dumplings in it and put... And she came back with a dish of food. And I sat there and I ate everything. And my wife's eyes, they're just open looking at me, and I'm just there eating. And when I was finished, I said, bring me something to drink. And I stand here, my friends. And for the first time in those weeks, I ate something, and it stayed in my stomach. The God of the universe, touch me and make me whole. I was shackled by a heavy burden, but he came, the hand of Jesus came and touched me. And now I'm no longer the same. He touched me. Oh, he touched me. Oh, the joy that floods my soul. Something happened, and now I know. He touched me and made me whole. As you go through these 10 days of prayer, don't let it be a ritual. Take something to God and ask him for deliverance. May God bless each and every one of you, is my prayer in Jesus' name.